it's clear that China's technology capability, like its capability is very high. The resources that the government can muster are substantial. And yet some of the very basic stuff that you would expect in terms of the data that you need to analyze what's happening is not available. So some obvious examples in that. When you look at elsewhere in the world, when you try to calculate, if you look at the consumer price index, so inflation, right, ends up with one number, the percentage change each year in the price level. To get that number is based on a basket of 500 or more different products. So it's measuring different prices across different products. The prices of those different products, or those different products, are weighted, and then that weighted index is joined together to produce that one number, which is the inflation rate. So obviously very important in that process is knowing the weights. You need to be able to calculate what the different contribution of products is to the inflation process, you need to know what the weights are. In China, those weights are very difficult to get hold of. Like, they're not transparent. The same is true in terms of the weights, in terms of what produces industrial production, the industrial production index. Again, the weights aren't there. Another problem, when you look at people forecasting China's economic, so you'll see that Bloomberg and Reuters and the other agencies, like, they'll ask everybody, all the economists on the sell side in particular, like what their forecasts are for the economy, for these big aggregate numbers, like what's happening with retail sales, what's happening with industrial production, what's happening with GDP, right? They want to know what the market thinks the economy is doing. Now, that as a general principle is very reasonable, right? Like, you want to know, is the economy getting worse or getting better relative to where forecasts are? That's important for market sentiment. It's important for understanding, is the economy accelerating or slowing down? The problem in China is there's nothing to found those forecasts on, particularly if you think about something like GDP. And so GDP, we can get some sense from the production side of the economy what's happening with GDP each quarter. But one of the things that China very much lacks is a quarterly breakdown of expenditure on GDP that is like the bread and butter, like the very basics of something that we've provided in another economy. And it seems very unlikely that China, with its capabilities these days, doesn't have the capacity to be able to produce those data. It's just not something that's in the public domain. And so I think one of the problems with kind of focusing on the fact that some data series are disappearing, is that it misses the fact that the bigger problem in China is that a lot of the data stuff isn't really improving.